Madam Chair, we are broadcasting.
Thank you. Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Environment and Planning Committee of Georges River Council. I'll declare the meeting open at 7 p.m. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet tonight and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. They are the Bidjigal people of the Eora Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge the Mayor tonight. Mayor Nick Hatteras is in attendance of this meeting. Thank you, Mayor. Notice of live streaming of the committee meeting. Staff and the public are reminded that this meeting is open and the meeting is being broadcast live to the public on Council's website in accordance with Section 4 of Council's Code of Meeting Practice. The Code of Meeting Practice states that only if the meeting moves into a closed or confidential session in accordance with Section 13 of the Code of Meeting Practice will the public broadcasting of the meeting be suspended. Council's Code of Meeting Practice prohibits the electronic recording of meetings without the express permission of Council. Apologies. Are there any apologies for tonight's meeting? I think we have everybody in attendance. Great. Okay, move on to disclosures of interest. Do any councillors have any interests to declare tonight? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Public participation. Are there any speakers for tonight's meeting? No, there are no speakers. Thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting, which would be, that's the meeting held on the 14th of March 2022. If I could have a mover, moved by Councillor Borg, and a seconder, seconded by Councillor Jamieson. I'll put that to the meeting. All those in favour, say aye. Those against? Okay, I'll declare that carried. Councillor Tegg, you're online, aren't you? You can hear us clearly?
Yep, I can hear you.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Thornton, do we need to, because Councillor Tegg is on? Okay, we'll move on for that. We only have one item on the agenda for tonight. That is ENV 011-22, the adoption of the public exhibition Draft Wildlife Protection Area Policy 2022. Before we go to discuss that, I'll call for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Marnie and seconded by Councillor Wang. Okay, do any of the councillors have any questions for, we have Mr. Andrew Spooner with us tonight who can answer any questions, or perhaps, does anyone have any questions first up? No? Mr. Spooner, would you like to maybe just give us a quick overview of this particular policy, please?
Sorry, Chair. I just realised I probably should just put a non-significant non-pecuniary interest because I live adjacent to Moore Reserve, which is mentioned in the policy. So I'll put that through the system, but it's very precautionary, but I should probably do it. Okay,
thanks, Councillor Tegg. That's totally fine. Thank you. Mr. Spooner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It gives me great pleasure to talk to this report tonight. This is a follow-on from the original work that was done in relation to the biodiversity study. It was performed in 2021. One of the key recommendations was that council should look to declare wildlife protection areas in 19 reserves that had been identified as having threatened or endangered species contained within those, and also had the presence of cats through detection through their wildlife cameras and movement sensors when they are out doing their fauna study during that biodiversity study. One of the key things in relation to the control of cats is that the Companion Animals Act, which looks after basically cats and dogs, is a little bit different when it comes to cats compared to dogs. Dogs cannot be out on a public street free of being on a leash, except if they're in an unleashed area. Whereas at the moment, cats can roam. There are no issues with cats roaming. The only places in which they cannot roam are food preparation areas or within 10 metres of those, or in wildlife protection areas. Now, wildlife protection areas aren't a common thing in local government. I'm only familiar with a couple of councils, and the report talks about Tweed Council and talks about Blue Mountains Council as having policies in place for such areas, for wildlife protection areas. I'm not aware of too many others. So it is a fairly significant step for Georges River Council to act on those recommendations of the biodiversity study. So the only other area which you can actually impound a cat is if it's actually attacking and causing harm or damage to humans or to other animals. they're the only three occurrences that you can make action against the cat and impound it. So by bringing this in, this gives us the opportunity to protect those areas. And if you look through the report, it talks about those 19 areas where we've got, endangered species actually, in relation to the grey-headed flying fox and the powerful owl, which we really are quite keen to keep and protect. So it enables another level of protection to these animals in these locations. In addition to that, we're looking at, obviously we need to promote this with the community, and we need to do some education with the community, but we're also looking at signposting these locations, and we will talk more about that in a subsequent report if council does declare to go out on public exhibition with the draft policy and with the nomination to declare those 19 areas. The actual policy itself talks about the mechanisms by which we can declare these areas, the strategies which we'll put in place to enforce these areas. And it talks also about 14 of these reserves which have been identified for priority enforcement, because we accept that, we don't have unlimited funds in the local government environment. And these 14 reserves out of the 19 have been identified because they meet some key criteria, one of which is that they are at a level 3 conservation area as identified by the biodiversity study. Clearly they are land owned by the council. They've been identified as having a cat identified as part of that biodiversity study. And the fourth one escapes me. No, that's it. That's it. So we're looking to implement those as priority areas for enforcement purposes. It's proposed that we put the policy on exhibition, clearly seeking comments from the community who are passionate about these areas. We can evaluate that and bring a further report back to council if council has a mind to move the recommendation as it is to go on exhibition. The report also talks that there is no conflict with our current plans of management. The works that we're doing here fit firmly within there, and there is no conflict with our areas that are already declared as leash-free areas, because we're not proposing that the wildlife protection areas will cover any leash-free area in some of those reserves, which have got, I guess, a dual function because they're being identified as wildlife protection areas. But the maps attached to the draft policy clearly show the locations in those reserves where the wildlife protection area would apply. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Spooner. Mr. Mayor, you had a question?
Yes, through the chair, thank you. Andrew, Mr. Spooner, one thing that's really worrying me is paragraph 13, which says that there are 10,362 cats in the Georges River local government area, but 5,206 recorded as not desexed. Is that is there anything that are they required by law to have them desexed, or is it just they can? It's just up to them whether they want to or not.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that question. There is a benefit in doing that. Clearly, that registration fees are cheaper if the animal is desexed, and that's one of the incentives. But there's also an incentive that the report talks about as well, that if you don't have your animal desexed, you've got to have an annual permit. So that's another disincentive not to desex your animal. But there is no law to say that your cat must be desexed. But it's an incentive-based approach to getting as many cats desexed as possible.
Okay. The other thing is that the other question I have, because I'm not familiar with what cat owners do with their cats. I know, you've got a dog, you could take a dog off leash area and it can run around. What are the common practices of cat owners with their cats running around? Because they're a bit smaller and they're likely to run into the bush and just never come back.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like I've indicated previously, there are no controls about the roaming of cats, and provided that they don't go to food preparation areas or they attack and cause harm, to humans or other animals. There are no restrictions on that. So individually, they're not, cat owners aren't breaking any law by allowing them to roam, provided they're not in those areas as previously indicated. So I can't comment on the habits of cat owners, but from a legal point of view, the law is quite clear that they are allowed to roam and leave their property, which, as you've indicated, which is contrary to what can happen with dogs.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Spooner. Are there any further questions, councillors? No. Thanks for that overview as well, Andrew. That was really helpful. I think congratulations to you and your staff for putting this together. I think it's a great initiative. It's quite horrifying statistics that you've quoted in here with the number of animals that are killed per day by cats and foxes, etc. It's quite extraordinary. So anything we can do to try and protect our wildlife is a great step for council to take. So this is to go out on exhibition, councillors. So if there are no further questions, I'll put it to the meeting. Ms. Thornton, are you going to go around? Thank
I
you.
will. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll ask for your vote, please.
For.
Councillor Bull,
For.
Councillor Jamieson,
For.
Councillor Marnie, Councillor Tegg,
For the motion.
thank you, and Councillor Wang.
For the motion.
That's unanimous, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks, Ms. Thornton. So we'll declare that one carried. And as that is the only item on the agenda for tonight, we will close the meeting at 7:12 p.m. And thank you everyone for your attendance.
Staff, please end the broadcast.